of years ago, this reporter was invited by the History Press to write a book on Denver's significance as Neal Cassady's proving ground and subsequent nerve center for the expanding beat scene and its relationship with developing hippie culture, which quickly overtook and outmoded it in the 60s with Denver's unnatural son Cassady behind the wheel of Ken Kesey's acid bus, being the strongest link between the two. Well, that's what I wrote anyway. I considered myself, while no less rooted in their influence, to have evolved beyond that route. But in the course of writing the Denver beat scene, I became acquainted with two of Neal and Carolyn's daughters, Jamie and Kathy, and Arvada's Robert Hyatt, eldest known living son of Neal Cassady, whose memoir, Beat Bastard, and Adoptee's Portfolio, was just published by Robin Stratton's Big Table Publishing in Boston, and copies are available here tonight. And I realized the connection I had made years in the past was still as strong and had grown beyond itself without coming loose even slightly. And there's always some fool splitting hairs. I personally have never understood the obsession with Cassady. Some self-important nuts and bolts type, dealing in plain facts type. I personally have never understood the obsession. Oh, get out of here. Whose obsession? Obsession what? Don't join that Doom Hills gang. Kerouac's obsession, Ken Kesey's obsession with Cassady, or society's obsession, or wondering why is he famous, or thinking he shouldn't be famous, or once have been infamous, due some would say to Kerouac's and Kesey's exploitation of Cassady's life as his art, among artists lacking artful living, to the detriment of Cassady's family life at the time, wife Carolyn, kids Jamie, Kathy, and John, which trained bear programming began in the 1930s lower downtown alleyways with young Neal as the cherubic shill for a gang of slumped 1930s era drunks, one being his father, the barber, Neal Sr. Family ties, the human family. Juan Thompson, son of Hunter S., has observed that he continues to discover nuances of his late father's character. Well, that's my relationship to the Beat generation. Not long ago, I noticed a comment by noted Kerouac biographer and Beat historian Gerald Nicosia on one of Jamie Cassady's threads, in which I learned that, contrary to my understanding, and I gather conventional understanding, the late Jack Kerouac had filed divorce papers from his late wife Stella and verbally sworn off all fraternity with his Greek in-laws in the year leading up to his death. I never knew that. And in the last few months, I have edited and ghostwritten parts of 2 volumes of septuagenarian Liverpudlian Alan Graham's Chronicles. Al came up as a young hunter-gatherer in the bitter end of post-World War II Liverpool, forced into that position by necessity, hijacking unwatched food trucks with the help of his brother Frankie and other street pugs for the daily rations to survive, dodging scuffers, Scouse slang for cops, and ready to headbutt whoever opposed him. Like on that show Peaky Blinders. When John, Paul, and George were in the Quarrymen, Al and his mates were in the same crowd of rock and roll teens. A few years later, when the Quarrymen changed their name to the Beatles and took the Cavern Club on Matthew Street by storm, Al was working at a tailor's round the corner. The second volume of Graham's Chronicles follows him to the USA in the 60s, where he's accepted as the son-in-law of Anne's father, George Stephen Morrison, the naval admiral who started the Vietnam War. Also meeting her mother, the strong-willed Clara Morrison, and her 2 brothers, Andy and Jim. Jim Morrison, lead singer of The Doors, had recently become one of the most popular rock stars of the era and cut all ties with his parents, reinventing himself as an arbitrary species. Few people know. Morrison himself was a direct product of the Beat generation's influence. And Graham also spent time in the employ of Sylvester Stallone as a bodyguard and tutor for his son, Sage Moonblood Stallone, 76, 2012. At the time, a rambunctious, attention-hungry child who grew up to be a filmmaker and died far too young. And also worked as a fixer for porn king and modern American free speech fighter Larry King, systematically upending the conservative culture of Springfield, Missouri, while Flint was incarcerated at the Federal Medical Center there, feigning insanity for legal reasons. Well, that project is up next and depends on Al's successful recovery from the latest in a couple of drastic heart operations, and all best to him. That's freelance writing life. Nowhere and everywhere at once, all the time, and carrying heavy boxes of books. Back to Thompson for a second. Juan was intelligent, thoughtful, well-spoken, and courteous. His resemblance to Hunter S. as a young man was undeniable, though his manner of conveyance seemed far more sensitive and effective than his late pop's garbled growl. Hunter was there in the bones of his skull and the shape of his face. Like Neal Cassady is here with us now in this room in the shape of this scene all these many years later in what used to be his hometown. I was invited to write something for a group of artists for rent control in Denver formed by Rosanna Frechette in opposition to the astronomical rent hikes in Denver since legalization of first medical then recreational cannabis a few years ago. I sent in a piece about riding the light rail past somewhere the young Neal Cassady had worked, then past a group of homeless customers camped under the highway overpass near Lincoln Ave in Ohio. And I was musing on Neal's own homeless roots on Larimer Street and in boxcars, how those clashed with the idea of a ritzy hotel being built in his name near the Platte River. You heard about that? I had just written a guide to beat-related landmarks in Denver on sale here tonight, and it seemed an outgrowth of that, feeling that way, seeing those people. I remembered Turkey Towardovich standing in the parking lot behind what used to be Coffee Grounds on 17th and Clarkson, where I hosted a reading, and relating how East High guidance counselor Justin Brierly had pulled on students' armpit hairs affectionately, some early 1940 swim class his grandfather took. Turkey Towardovich, who? Well, now. The latest volume of my fantastic biography has just been published, touching on my friendship with Neal's eldest known living son, Robert Hyatt, star of tonight's bash, locating a publisher for his forthcoming memoir, Beat, Bastard, and Adoptee's Portfolio. Give him a hand. Also, my simultaneous experience befriending and ghostwriting parts of a couple of volumes of the autobiographical chronicles of septuagenarian Liverpudlian Alan R. Graham, former Larry Flint fixer. Well, one subtext of my new book on sale here tonight concerns the adventures of an unhoused man named Turkey Towardovich. Turkey as a reference to the James Dean film Giant, and Towardovich as he seems bound in a definite direction as opposed to being aimless, whose grandparents went to East High with Cassady and who was recently pronounced chronically homeless by a respected Denver rag. Turkey took the arduous trouble of hitchhiking to Nebraska and volunteering his support to the besieged natives near the Standing Rock Reservation, only to return extremely disappointed by the hardship undergone. We're in the home stretch now. I hope you're still enjoying this. Another friend of mine, fictionalized and overgrown as Tawadros Magnus, has recently returned to Denver from his other hometown of Washington, D.C., motivated by a mandate to liberate one of his daughters from a mother intent on over-medicating her offspring into unobtrusiveness. And due to the cost of tending to his own kidney failure, Tawadros can't afford to live independently and is currently staying in a shelter, which he refers to as the pre-FEMA camp, posting regular updates on Facebook like this one. Day 20 in the pre-FEMA. I've decided to look at this place like a really bad boarding school or junior college. The meals, people, and accommodations are so-so, but you're still in junior college or boarding school, right? I don't know, I'm trying to look on the bright side. Or this one, week 5 in the pre-FEMA camp. A guy who I knew on the outside world, who I used to consider a friend, is now in here. Another who I still do consider a friend is also now among the residents here, as I predicted. This plight of homelessness is spreading and may claim more and more people I know. My advice, get some shower shoes and trust in the process. Lessons can be learned if you watch for them, and if you don't heed the warning signs, you will get swung on. A third friend from my Denver past, formerly known as the intergalactic space goddess Winona Righteous in Denver's post-punk art rock underground music scene, late 90s Rebus Gallery, make fun of power, make power of fun, is currently also staying in a shelter and temporarily unable to identify with Kerouac's homily about kindness equating to beatitude as lovingly rendered by muralist Tommy K. Nahulu on the east wall of the Fork and Spoon Cafe on Colfax. And I personally have never understood this obsession with greed and amassing amounts, and I don't understand the objectification of essence, this seemingly unstoppable encroachment of commodification of otherwise ineffable emotion. I mean, me personally, I never have quite understood. Maladjusted to that. I'm not sure why different people have different experiences with unexpectedly being struck homeless. I'm not sure whose fault that is. All the rent's going up, what condition to blame? I enjoy smoking pot myself, and I'm grateful for the convenience, so I'm reluctant to demonize that commodity or the idea of its legalization, which is only sensible after hundreds of years of unwarranted prohibition. But rents need to go down. Housing needs to be more affordable. I propose we institute a directory of artists, writers, musicians, comics, creatives of every stripe, keeping track of our productivity, thus qualifying for lower rent rates based on our contributions to Denver's creative character. Sounds reasonable. In return, the city will provide us with venues for expression of our work, performance spaces, or hard copies of our writing, art, and films. Or another such mutually beneficial arrangement. My idea for establishment of a self-sustaining local creative scene in the coming year involves civic recognition and appreciation. Anyone interested in collaborating on a ballot initiative, get back to me. Or take that notion up yourself and do it better than I ever could. Don't join the Doom Hills gang. Enjoy the bash. Make it great. Thank you.